29. Grandpa had been moaning since late last night. He had been shaken by fits of coughing, leaving him gasping for air, his chest heaving. "Grandpa, are you all right?" Ningning asked, patting his back gently. "Yes." Grandpa's reply was weak, unconvincing, accompanied by another fit of coughing and wheezing. For Ningning, it had been quite exciting to learn that Grandpa had lots of relatives in Fengyang. Maybe they could help, but they were so far away. She had never been to Fengyang, though she had gone with Mama to Hefei and even Qingdao to visit Papa. She didn't want to lose Grandpa. He had always been in her life. His daily chanting in his soft, humming voice had been one of her earliest memories. "Grandpa," she said softly, "tell me what's wrong." It was the 10th time she had asked. Every time Grandpa had just shaken his head and kept moaning. "The food," Grandpa mumbled at last. "And the water," he wheezed and gasped again. She hadn't thought about it, but Grandpa was right. The cold, steamed buns were very old, dry and powdery, and it was difficult for Grandpa to drink cold, unboiled water. He always had a small bowl of hot soup at the end of his meal, a few slices of bean curd, green beans or spinach leaves, and a finely chopped green onion on top. It seemed like such a luxury now. Ningning had another idea. "Grandpa," she said, "I'm going to make you hot tea." He looked at her, puzzled. "It will help you. I'm sure it will." "Don't." Grandpa shook his head. "It's too risky to start a fire." But she was already tiptoeing toward the main room. Late afternoon was drawing to a close. The sun was sinking slowly in the west. Looking out the window, Ningning could see the swaying branches of the prune tree outside and the row of buildings that were still standing along the Sun Yushan Boulevard north. But beyond that, a haze lingered in the air. The city was engulfed in thick dust and smoke. Ningning was in the kitchen now. She could see several items which had been thrown onto the floor. Their small stove was overturned and lying on its side. Cinders and coals were scattered about the floor. There were a few broken bowls, cracked cups, smashed plates, and their old dented metal water kettle with its wooden handle. There were small glass jars and wooden boxes. In the fading light, it would be difficult to find what she needed. She crouched to the floor and searched with her fingers, feeling about, careful not to touch broken glass or anything with a sharp edge. She found a box of matches, crushed by heavy bullet food. Nearby, she found the box containing the tea as well. When it had fallen, most of the tea had spilled onto the floor, but she gathered up what she could. She also found the wood chips used to start the stove. The vat they used for water had a big crack now. Luckily, there was still enough water left near the bottom. Ningning searched for Grandpa's favorite teapot, only to discover the small shards of maroon clay lying smashed on the floor. The teapot was old. Grandpa had been using it for as long as she could remember. It was made from a special clay from Yixing County, and whenever tea was brewed in it, it held the flavor of the tea, so that over time the teapot itself developed its own wondrous fragrance. Ningning held one of the pieces to her nose and smelled it. She found the small lid nearby, which had rolled away but did not break. On the top was a small carving of a smiling Buddha. She placed the lid back on the shelf. She had to make do with other vessels now, but she couldn't find any unbroken bowls or cups. What about the smoke? If she lit a fire, it might be seen from outside. She walked to her bedroom and examined a cotton quilt which had been thrown off the bed to the floor. Gathering the soft folds, she took it back to the kitchen, and balancing herself carefully on a chair, she punched the fabric through 2 nails sticking out of the wall above the kitchen window. the quilt hung covering the window and sagging a little bit in the middle. Now no one from outside could see in. Slowly, she went to the front room and opened the front door carefully. The hallway was quiet. A few feet away, the stairs led down into darkness. Satisfied, Ningning returned to the kitchen and proceeded to set the small stove upright again. She put in a few wood chips and some scraps of paper that she found. She attempted to strike a match, but it sputtered and died out. Feeble wisp of smoke curled upward. She tried again. Still nothing. With the third match, she succeeded in getting it lit. The flame erupted in blue and then settled down to a warm, glowing yellow. She reached into the stove and set the match underneath the wood chips and the crumbled paper. The paper caught right away. She placed a few longer pieces of wood on top, and soon they glowed at the edges. Smoke started to pour from the stove. She threw in a few more small chips of wood and more paper. She blew on the fire gently. The yellow flame licked the metal grate on the top of the stove. The wood crackled and one or two more embers floated upward. She put some water in the kettle and placed it on the stove. "What are you doing?" asked Grandpa. "Making tea, but your teapot, it's broken." "Yes, but the lid is still good," she said, coming back to his bedside. "Never mind. There is another teapot somewhere in that trunk, there in the corner." The old wooden trunk was not large, but it was filled with all kinds of small memorabilia and family keepsakes. Ningning had seen them all before, though she never noticed a teapot. She remembered the short bamboo flute with brown and black patterns and golden tassels, a hand-knit scarf, and a pair of pillowcases with 2 birds embroidered on it, and a few small bundles of yellowed rice paper with calligraphic writings. There were also a few pairs of fluffy, red-padded baby shoes and a toy drum. "See it?" "No," she said, still feeling around in the trunk. You mean this?" "That's it." It was a bundle wrapped in a deep red cloth. She took it out and carried it to Grandpa's bed. Grandpa untied the silk ribbon at the top. Inside was a small wooden box. He opened it in front of a Ningning. It was only a bit larger than a grown-up's fist. It was an exquisite teapot in the shape of a bird. The bird's beak was the spout. The clay was deep red, and its surface was smooth. On the side of the pot had been carved some Chinese characters. "This is a bird salter pot," Grandpa murmured. "Your mama gave it to me a long time ago." "You want to use it now?" It seemed so special. "Why not?" Ningning returned to the kitchen with a new pot. The fire continued to burn. She put a few more small pieces of wood on the fire. She then put 2 spoonfuls of rainflower tea leaves into the pot. Taking the kettle from the stove, she poured in some hot water, just enough to rinse the leaves, as she had seen Grandpa do countless times. She put the lid on and poured the water out. She added water again, this time being careful not to have the water come up too close to the rim of the teapot. She put the lid back on. With a kitchen towel as cushion to help support the hot pot, Ningning carried it toward Grandpa's room, gingerly, minding every step so that the tea would not spill. She set the pot down on the small nightstand. Grandpa looked at the pot and closed his eyes. "It's wonderful," he exclaimed, drawing the fragrance deep into his lungs. Ningning smiled.